Hi folks, John Cordisco back again with another great chess video for you. This is from the 41st Dortmund chess tournament, round 4, played on Monday, July 29th, 2013. It's between a couple of really good players. Naiditsch, I believe that's pronounced as white, rated 27-10, and Andrejkin as black, rated 27-27. It's a really low pay. It's a really interesting game. I'm going to call this video Pawns, Pawns, Pawns. You'll see in the end game what I mean. It starts off, like I said, a really low pay. After a6, bishop backs up the usual. Bishop c5, c3, which of course is your standard really low pay. Knight to f6, d4. Bishop backs up to a7, and they both castle. This position has been seen a million times. Bishop to g5, pinning the knight. h6, bishop backs up. I kind of like White's position here, even though it shows a tiny advantage for black. I still like White's position here. E takes d, queen to c1. As you can see, White's got a lot of threats here, moving the e-pawn, capturing the knight, picking up the h-pawn with the queen. A lot of stuff going on there. d6 to stop the pawn push, bishop takes, pawn takes, and c takes. Of course, you can see why the knight can't take here, because he's pinned against the queen. Now the dark squared bishop is stuck over here. Even though it's a good diagonal to be on, it can't be here to help with the pinned knight. So black goes g5. Now it takes a lot of guts to do the next move, and it really is the best move, is that knight takes g5. Instead of knight takes g5, if taking that free pawn would have went bishop d7, queen to c1, g takes, and of course that's a huge advantage for black. After knight takes e4. A couple of things there. Instead, if he had taken h takes, queen takes check, king h7, and I wouldn't like black's position at all. After knight takes, knight to f3. Queen to d7, knight to c3, f5, just to protect the knight. What he's trying to do, if the white takes knight, pawn takes, and this pawn comes here, and that's a really good center for black, with this bishop bearing down here, and of course this pawn is going to be able to come up here. Queen takes h6. Now black's king is really exposed. This is going to be interesting. I'll tell you the truth, if I was black, I don't know if I'd have the nerve. Queen comes over immediately to protect. Queen takes, king takes. Shows almost a half a point advantage for white, but I'll tell you the truth, with the pawns doubled here, I know white has an isolated pawn here. I think it'd be much easier to play white. Rook a to c1. You're going to see later in the endgame, while I call this pawns, 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 or pawns attack. I'm not sure what I'm going to call this video. You'll see towards the end. Bishop to b7. Of course, he's trying to get this pawn up here so bishop can take and have these two bishops just bearing down in the position. Knight to e2 to guard the d-pawn with both knights. Bishop to b6. I think with that move, black's just waiting to see what white's going to do. Knight to f4. That's why he moved to e2. He wants to get the knight up in a better spot, and that's a lot better spot for that knight. Rook f to e8. Rook f to d1. Guard the pawn again. a5 and d5. That's what he wanted. Of course, if he takes, pawn takes pawn, knight will take. And that's a really good spot for that knight, going after this bishop. And also, too, if he pushes instead, this bishop is now blocked. I kind of like that move a lot. c5, he does it anyway. He blocks his late squared bishop in. What would have happened if c takes, knight takes, bishop takes, rook takes, king g6? Would have gave white about a 3/4 of a pawn advantage. That certainly would have opened up the position, but he gets rid of his isolated pawn, but black also gets rid of his doubled pawn. After c5, knight to g5. He wants to bring this knight into this square here. That's a darn good square, or either this knight, one of the two. That's a darn good square for that knight. Bishop to a6. If he had taken, if knight had taken, bishop takes, a4, h4. Looks pretty good for white. It's almost a 1.5 advantage. Bishop to a6. The f knight checks, which is the logical knight. I mean, this knight here is right on his king, guarding a couple of key spots. I think he played the right knight. Knight checks. If he had gone the other way, king to f7. Now I want to put yourself in black spot here. Here you are, even though you have two good bishops here that are on his king's position, here you are. Here's your king. All alone. You got the knight, the bishop. I mean, you're exposed. Takes a lot of nerve to play this position, I'll tell you. King to g6. I don't know what he's trying to do. Maybe bring his rook around over here maybe. I'm not really sure. Interesting might have been instead king to g8. It stays out of a lot of checks, but it's tough because this knight really has nowhere to go, at least for now. Here and here aren't really that good of a spot for it. There's nothing he can do about it, so that might have been a better alternative. Knight takes, pawn takes. He's still pretty exposed, but the white's rooks aren't really in play yet against the king. Rook to c3, here he comes. He's trying to bring the rook over to the g file, the h file, to go after the king. Rook to g8, rook checks. This is where black loses his nerve, and it's a tough position to be sure. He probably should have went king to s7 or h7. Probably, I like h7 myself, but instead he plays king to h5, and that is going to be a disaster. After h7, rook to h3, king to g6. He just goes back and forth. After king to h5, this position becomes very untenable. Bishop, king to g6, puts himself into a discovered check, which is very unusual. But there's no really good place for that black squared bishop to attack anything. All the black bishop here is guarding this pawn. This guard's guarding this pawn. His two rooks and his bishop are on light squares. There's really no place to go that's that good of a discovered check. But he goes to d8 anyway. King to f7. Rook takes. If he had played bishop takes, which looks like it wins the pawn, that might have been interesting. Rook takes. F takes. Bishop takes. Knight takes. Rook here. Knight takes, rook to a6. It's well over a 2-point advantage for white. White's up 2 pawns. As you can see, these 3 pawns here have absolutely no pawns to stop them. It's a bad position for black. King takes, bishop takes. It's very similar to what happens. Bishop takes, knight takes, rook to a7, knight to e8. He doesn't take the bishop. He's going after this pawn here. He's going after black's d-pawn to get another pawn. Knight takes a6 is worse because we went through that scenario already. After knight to e8, bishop to d3. I guess he's trying to get his only passed pawn to get some support. Knight takes, rook to d7, rook to f5, rook to b7. There's not much left here for black. If you had gone a4, you just would have won a3. After rook to b7, rook to d2 just to shore up that b pawn. a4, a3, 1 to stop the advance of black's a pawn, but 2 is you notice that those two pawns are on dark squares now, so the bishop can't really do much. c4, rook to b8 doesn't do much. h4, here come the pawns. f8 for the king. King to h2. I think a better idea would have been g4 and rook to a7. g4 I like a lot better. After rook to b3, it's funny, it says here on the computer, if he had gone rook to b5 instead, it says doesn't get the bull off the ice. Pretty funny. Because after rook to b5, knight to e3, and it's pretty much lost. After rook to b3, knight to d4, hitting the rook. Now he's going to try a trick here. He's going to try to get his c-pawn to queen, and you'll see how. I think h5 would have been better. Instead of d4, if he had won h5 just to get the pawns rolling, I kind of like that myself. But after d4, c3. I think maybe his last chance for any counterplay at all would have been rook back to b7, d6, e3, f takes, rook here, rook check, king to e8. It's still untenable, but I think he had a little better shot with that. After c3, knight takes b3, he gives up the rook, a takes, he's figured he's going to queen one of them. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. B takes, and what he does, he moves the bishop in the way. Figuring, okay, there's no way he can stop the pawn, but unfortunately he can. He goes rook to d4, and now this rook is going to swing over and give himself up for that pawn, which he does. b2, rook to b4, pawn queen, rook takes, bishop takes. Now here's why I called this pawns, pawns, pawns. Here you are with 6 white pawns against the bishop and a single pawn. And out of your 6 pawns, 5 of them are connected. It's doomed for black. King to g3, here comes the king. King to e7, king to f4, king to d6, c4, disregard that pawn, even though it's on a light square. Bishop to d3 going after it in h5. And white knows he's doomed. Or excuse me, black knows he's doomed. Because after bishop takes, pawn takes. And the end of the game. I thought that was a really interesting game because of the open black king. It's funny when he made that move king to h5, which basically set his doom. It happens when you're under pressure, when your king's exposed and your opponent's pieces are coming after your king, and you just mess up. And that's the way it goes sometimes. Well, folks, that's it for this video. It's going to be quite a while, a week or two, before I can get any other videos. I'm going to play in the U.S. Open in Wisconsin, in central northern United States. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I want you to remember, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. And I hope to see all of you in the next video, and please comment, and please subscribe. Bye-bye, folks.